Welcome to the Danny Clinkscale Reasonably Irreverent podcast. Insightful and witty commentary, probing interviews, and detours from the beaten path.
Welcome to Kansas City Profiles presented by Easton Roofing. Jan Stenerud is a combination of a fairy tale story as well as a complete trailblazer. Coming from Norway as the first Norwegian player ever to play in the National Football League, he came to this country with anything but a football future in his mind. A ski jumping scholarship was available at Montana State, so he came all the thousands of miles, and during the course of his college career, just by happenstance, started to kick a football using his soccer background and starting to kick a football and kick it tremendously well and tremendously far. Eventually, that would all lead to him becoming the first exclusive kicker to make the Pro Football Hall of Fame. He was part of the Chiefs' last championship team 50 years ago. He had almost all high notes in his career as a Kansas City Chiefs, Minnesota Vikings, and Green Bay Packers kicker, and only one day on Christmas Day in 1971 marred that even a bit, although it's probably overblown given all the accomplishments that eventually led him to Canton. It's a fascinating story, it's an interesting story, it's an unlikely story, and we'll tell it with Jan Stenerud coming up next on Kansas City Profiles, presented by Easton Roofing. We're here with Joe Spiker, the president of Easton Roofing, and Joe, you worked for other companies in the construction industry. What inspired you to start your own company in Easton Roofing?
Well, you know, Danny, when you are working for somebody else, you oftentimes don't get to see the project through from beginning to end, and you don't get the final control over the customer experience. And I wanted to build a place where people can come and get work done on their house and not have to worry about being treated the wrong way and get a good customer service experience start to finish.
The company slogan is "Where Integrity Matters." Why is that so particularly important to you?
Well, for us, what that means is treating each other with respect at work, treating our clients with respect, and making the right choice, especially when no one's looking. So when you're presented all the time as a contractor with choices that have to be made, are you going to make more money on this if you cut a corner? And we just wanted to make a place and a slogan that said to our people and to whoever is our customer, we're not going to do that. We're going to make the right choice regardless of profit.
Easton Roofing, where integrity matters. Sumner One is the company to make your office maximize efficiency. Their family of companies make up one of the largest independent dealers of office technology in the Midwest. They are proud to bring the best service and technology to top companies across the region. Sumner One can help your organization run more smoothly than ever. Sumner One printers, copiers, MFPs, managed print services, document management, infrastructure design, IT services, disaster recovery, and business continuity. Welcome to the one place where everything works. For more information, call Carl Little at 913-752-2256. Get a refreshing change of your expectations of a sports bar and restaurant at the 23rd Street Brewery in Lawrence. Matt Llewellyn's welcoming spot at Clinton Parkway and Cassold covers all the bases, like their own handcrafted beers and all the televisions you need for great sports viewing. But it's the large, varied, and delicious menu that stands apart. From a favorite of mine like the awesome ahi tuna appetizer to great sandwiches, outstanding pizza, and truly fantastic entrees, the 23rd Street Brewery has it all. Matt and his friendly staff make it that much more enjoyable. Food until 10, fun until late. The 23rd Street Brewery is a can't-miss stop when you are in Lawrence. Jan Stenerud, Pro Football Hall of Famer for 3 different teams, I think, and it has a street named after him in his hometown of Easton, Norway, and longtime Chiefs ambassador and off and on resident of Kansas City, now back here for 6 years. It's a pleasure to catch up with you, and what we try to do here on Kansas City Profiles, presented by Easton Roofing, is to get to know some things or some parts of your story that maybe some people don't know. And, of course, we'll visit with some of the familiar parts of your story as well. Easton, Norway, a boy around 1950, born in the early 1940s. What was it like? You were the middle child. And what was young Jan Stenerud like? What was life like for him in Easton, Norway?
Well, it was a good life. Sports was a very important part of my excuse me. My dad was a good skier. My whole family on my dad's side were ski jumpers, and that's what everybody did when I grew up. And so I started competing in ski meets when I was 7 years old and played soccer in the summertime, of course. Every time 3 or 4 kids were playing outside and we had a ball that we could share. But I enjoyed it. Norway is a good place or Scandinavia is a good part of the world. Very innocent upbringing, I think. Enjoyed school. I kind of, school to me was like sports. I tried to compete. I tried to do well. But it was a good time thinking back. People have asked me, do I remember much about the war? I was born in 42.
Right.
And Norway was occupied by the Germans, so I don't really remember much about that. I just remember the last day when my dad was cutting some firewood out in the front yard, and the German soldier came and talked to him. And I was only 2.5 years old, but I can remember that vividly.
Wow.
And he came in, and my mother asked him, "What did you talk about?" And he said, "Well, the war is over. I hope it never happens again, and we can be friends." I remember that. That's
wow.
Quite a while ago now.
What a great story. What did your parents do?
My dad was a carpenter, but during the war, he had to do construction work. The war lasted in Norway for just a few months, and then we didn't expect a German occupation, and there was no way to fight the German military for longer than a fairly short time. So we were occupied, but during the war and afterwards, there were tough times for a while, and he basically did construction work for many years after that, worked hard. And I remember he was telling me and my younger brother, I had an older sister, and in those days, the gals really didn't have many careers. It sounds maybe odd today, but it was either be a school teacher or a nurse or something like that. But he was telling my brother and I, Arne is my brother's name, and he said, "You boys got to do a real good job in school because you need to get an education because I want you to have an indoor job." That was how he coined it. He didn't want to work outside in the cold winters in Norway. So that was the way how he motivated us to go to school.
What was the length of winter generally, and when did the weather start to deteriorate into winter weather, and when would it start to get nice?
Yeah, Norway is a long, narrow country, long north-south.
Right.
60 degrees north is where I live, which is similar to Anchorage, by the way. The Gulf Stream goes all the way over to the west coast of Norway and the Atlantic Ocean. And the climate is warmer than one would expect. We usually get snow on the ground. We were hoping for a white Christmas. Not always, but most of the time we had that. And it would last till end of March, being on the ground most of the time.
So not as severe as you would think. Not like Anchorage, for instance.
No, and not way up north either. But
right.
But typically, though, we had ski meets almost every weekend in January, February, early March. And usually the snow was on the ground. And it still is that way, I suppose. Hasn't changed a heck of a lot. But we were hoping for snow. We were looking down under the street lights and see if it was snowing because we couldn't wait to get on the skis and play on skis or start jumping in small hills. And we actually had 2 or 3 artificial lit jumping hills in my little hometown. Yeah. So after dinner, we go and turn on the switch and we could practice jumping at night.
I've always wondered about ski jumping from the standpoint of, obviously you can, start little and, just take a little jump, but eventually you're going to have to, go for it. Was there a lot of crashing and spilling things like that?
There is, because you start barely getting airborne.
Right.
And of course, all the kids did that then. Now, by the way, when I go back there 50-some years later, they develop ski jumpers, they develop tennis players or golfers here that bring them to camp in a lot of words. They're just a few that do it, but they're still maybe the strongest nation still in ski jumping. But still, in those days, when you grow up and then you go to a bigger hill, and sometimes the gap is pretty sizable.
Right.
Between the 30-meter hill, that's about 100 feet, almost 100 feet. That's the distance you're actually airborne.
Right.
But then all of a sudden, the next step may be up to almost a 60-meter, and then the 90-meter. So then if you don't have anything in between, it gets your attention.
I bet it does. But clearly you had some aptitude for it. And what was it like being a high school student in Norway, say, about early 1950s?
Well, it was, first of all, the sports was all club sports.
Right.
We just had a class we called gymnastics or whatever. We did some stretching and played some games, I guess, in that 1 hour. Other than that, all the sports, whether it was speed skating, whether it was cross-country skiing, or there was ski jumping or soccer, it was all through the clubs. And every club had they had these teams. So sports was very important in my upbringing. And the combination of school and sports, I think, is a pretty good combination. The team part of it, and just competing and being healthy, that's what we did.
For a person of your generation, you have pretty good size, 6'2". And when did you grow into that height early on? Were you a big kid?
No, I did not. No, then nobody's ever asked me that question before. I was the shortest guy in my class until I was 16. And I was worried about being real short. And then 17, 18, I grew almost a foot. Not quite, but probably 10 inches in 2 years.
Wow.
And then it took a little while to catch up again. So my ski jumping results were really good when I was 10, 11, 12. And then I was small. And then also when I was 17, I was wasn't quite as coordinated. But then when I was 18 and 19, I was back in the top 3 generally in my area of the country in the ski jumping competitions.
Now, how does a person from Norway end up getting recruited to be a ski jumper in Montana?
Montana State, both beautiful Bozeman, Montana. I was aware of the fact that some of my ski jumpers friends that were a couple of years older, some of them would get scholarships in the United States, and I hadn't thought much about it. All of a sudden, in spring of '62, I was 19 years old, just finished in the top 10 in the junior national championship. Got a letter from the ski coach at Montana State. His name was Bob Beck, and a Norwegian skier out there on the team at Montana State. His name was Tor Fagerås. But anyway, I knew his name because he had won the Norwegian national championship in Nordic combined. That's the combination with ski jumping and cross-country skiing. So he was a well-known name. So I got that letter from the coach and Tor, and they offered me a full-ride ski scholarship to Montana State. And, of course...
How many full scholarships did they offer?
I don't know for sure. I know I had a full one.
But you had a full one.
There were probably about 6, 7 scholarships. I think most of them were split.
Right.
But also I heard a lot about America. An uncle and aunt of mine had immigrated to Buffalo, New York back in 1921.
Right.
A lot of the immigration from Norway was between 1825 and 1925. And they came back every 5th summer or so and talked about the United States, the skyscrapers in New York, the big cars, all the big things in America. And I was fascinated by that. And I read a lot of stuff about the most... fascinating and richest country in the world. So I knew quite a bit about that. I didn't know about college and campus. When I talked about the campus, universities in Europe, you typically go to a building and to classes. You don't have really the campus life where you live on close to the schools, and you don't have the sports involved. You don't have the football games. You don't have the basketball games and all that. So that was really fascinating, I thought, when I got here, and really enjoyed that. That college experience has got to be better in this country than any other place on earth, I believe. Now, I have not been in all the other countries, but I just really totally enjoyed that.
So, but Montana's a pretty, there's not a lot of people in Montana, but that's a big state school, so there was a lot going on, and you enjoyed that campus experience.
Well, Montana State in those days were 4,500 students.
Right.
Now I notice it's over 16,000.
Right.
The town of Bozeman was about 15,000.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's probably about 50,000. But it's in Galton Valley. There's mountains on all sides. It's a beautiful, beautiful part of western Montana in the Rockies, and I go up there all the time. I like to spend as much time as I can up there. It's just a beautiful spot. Even now, there's less than 1 million people in the whole state.
Right, I know.
And it's the 4th largest state in the United States after Alaska, Texas, and California. So Montana is next. It's a very big state and not very much populated.
Right. I just did a driving trip in Wyoming a couple of years ago, and there's only 550,000 people in
I think
Wyoming.
Even less.
So serendipity, I guess it's called, or some kind of happenstance stepped into your life when you were a sophomore. First of all, you're running stadium steps, I guess, the day that you were discovered for training. Was that something that came to you in America? Running stadium steps is kind of an American thing, isn't it?
Well, stadium steps probably is, because we were running the hills in Norway all the time. Steep uphill. That was good for leg strength for ski jumping, and also, of course, we lived on bicycles. There was a hilly hometown. I used a bicycle up steep hills with one hand on the steering wheel and one holding the skis on the shoulder, so your legs got in pretty good shape. But stadium steps was new to me, but running the hills was common. So I started on the steps there. The old skiers did in my freshman year, my sophomore year, my junior year. I was actually discovered my junior year. The kicker on the team was kicking field goals. He also was a defensive back, but he was kicking field goals, and I hadn't played soccer then in 3 years. So I thought I had kind of an urge to kick this ball. and kicked a few with the toe like people kicked in those days.
Right,
Of
straight
course,
up.
I had tennis shoes on, and I noticed right away that I kicked further than he did. And I asked him after a few attempts, could I kick with the side of my foot like you take a corner kick in soccer? And he said, yes, you can do that. There's a guy for the Buffalo Bills. His name is Pete Gogolak.
Right.
This was in 1964. And looking back, that was actually Pete Gogolak's first year in professional football. So I kicked a few, and I did that probably 5 or 6 times during that fall season in my junior year, 1964. And unbeknownst to me, the basketball coach, his name was Les Kraft, not Les Kraft, it was Les Kraft's dad. Les Kraft played basketball at K-State a few years ago.
Yes.
His dad, Roger Kraft, was a basketball coach. He had seen me from his office window, went across the street, looked at me. Without me knowing this, he ran over to the football coach, Jim Sweeney, and he says, Coach, there's a skier out there who's kicking football. It's a long way, so you want to take a look at him. He didn't pay much attention to the basketball coach, but before the last home game in 1965, I was on the stadium steps. The team was working out in the stadium. I didn't really pay attention to them at all, and all of a sudden I heard the booming voice of Jim Sweeney, the head football coach, yelling, hey, skier, get your butt down here. He may have used the word that started with an A, I'm not sure, but here you can kick. And light workout on the Friday, and I never put the ball on the tee before, and I guessed about a 7-8 yard running start. We kicked from the 40-yard line like a kickoff.
Right.
And the slight breeze behind me, not strong, I remember, but nevertheless, I chose that direction. And I topped the ball. It went like a squib kick, and the big football players were kind of chuckling a little bit. And Sweeney says, why don't you try again? And this time I hit it, and it went through the goalpost, into the seats, and the goalpost, of course, in the kickoff is 70 yards away. And he got quiet, and he said, can you do that again? I said, I think so. So I did that 3 or 4 times, and the coach put my hand around his shoulder, and he said, what are you doing tomorrow? And I knew what he was talking about. The game was tomorrow. I wasn't eligible, but I suited up for the last home game to be adjusted or get used to the crowd. Well, the full house crowd at Montana State in those days was 8,000 people. I ski jumped in Oslo in front of 80,000, but you don't feel the same. The crowd isn't right there. You don't feel it the same way. So he talked me to go into spring practice for my senior year, and that's what I did. And I made the team, and they changed my scholarship from skiing to football my senior year, although I did both events.
So this sounds like something that kind of came naturally to you. Now, even though you'd kicked a soccer ball before, how did you get the knack for kicking a football?
I do not know, because the only thing the adjustment I made, I was leaning back and followed through high, because now you kick the ball over the crossbar instead of under like you do in soccer. I remember growing up that I always would take the penalty kicks and the corner kicks because I could kick the ball a little bit further than the other kids. That doesn't necessarily make you a better soccer player. But I did have a knack for that, and I didn't really know why. I guess it's like a kid picking up a rock and they can throw it further than the other kids. Because when I got into football and I kicked my first year there, I kicked a 59-yard field goal, and it took him almost a week to find out that broke the college record by 5 yards and the pro record by 3 yards.
I want to ask you about that, because it's such a long kick, especially for the time. It's surprising that maybe they even tried it. Had you just convinced them so much by the fact that you did it in practice a lot?
I think the coach had seen me do that, although he would joke afterwards and said, heck, I thought it was a 49-yarder. It didn't add 10 yards in the end zone. But he knew, but it was a fairly windy day, but I could do it routinely in practice. The altitude is almost as high as Denver.
Right.
And the college ball then was probably easy to kick because they'd been used a little bit. It wasn't like a brand new NFL football. Right. Although even the football they kick today is pretty well suited for kicking. I know that.
Right.
So, but he knew that. But also, if you missed in those days, it was like a punt. The ball went back to the 20-yard line. So the penalty wasn't any more than if you punted into the end zone.
Right.
So that's why we tried it.
And you tried a field goal of over 100 yards? I mean, not really, but I mean, they decided you would be a better option than the punter.
It's about the only record I have left, I believe. It was a 112-yard attempt. And it was a really windy day against Weber State, I remember. And we were kicking into the wind, and the punter had a hard time getting the ball over the line of scrimmage. And the ball's on our own 5-yard line, and Sweeney, the coach, yells, field goal team. And I said, what? He said, field goal team. Just line up and kick it as hard as you can. Find an open spot on the field and kick it to. So I'm lining up 2 yards. I'm actually standing 5 yards deep in the end zone. I can hardly see the goalpost. I'm 115 yards away. And sure enough, I found an open spot, and the ball rolled to about the 50-yard line. But he went down at the time as a 112-yard attempt.
There you go. Well, obviously, these things are going to attract a lot of attention, and the rules were different then, and there were 2 leagues. So you were drafted as a future draft choice, correct?
Yes. That 59-yard field goal, if I had not attempted that field goal, I probably would never have been discovered. But since that was the longest field goal ever kicked, at least after the drop kicking days,
right,
the scouts found out the next thing I know. Now, the draft, as you know, is a big deal. In early December, I got a telegram, and I was called into the athletic director's office. And the telegram was addressed to me, Jan Stenerud, care of Montana State Athletic Department. Congratulations, you've been drafted in the 3rd round in the AFL redshirt draft, signed by Jack Stedman. And I had to try to figure out what the heck this meant. Redshirt draft meant that I had still, since I was a different sport now, according to rules in those days, I could still be on the football team 1 more year.
Right.
So Sweeney, the head coach, says, listen, first of all, I need you on my team. I want you on my team. But if you're on the team another year, it's a good chance that you can draft it by the NFL as well. So I went to school 1 more full quarter. We had quarter system. And sure enough, after my second senior year then on the school, I was graduated at Christmas, the NFL had a special draft for about 30 of us. There were AFL redshirt draftees from the year before.
Right.
And out of that group, I was the first one to be picked by the Atlanta Falcons. They were brand new. They actually had been in operation for 1 year. So I had a choice between going to the AFL, Kansas City Chiefs, and the Atlanta Falcons. And with Hank Stram and Lamar Hunt and Tommy O'Boyle, it was a great talent scout for us, and Bobby Beathard, I wanted to come to Kansas City.
And you signed a pretty good contract for the time to be a kicker.
Yeah, looking back, I got I can tell you exactly what I got. This was almost a month before Super Bowl I, but I wasn't eligible to be a rookie until the next year. I had an $80,000 signing bonus, plus a car of my choice. I chose a Toronado Oldsmobile with a sunroof and the whole bit, and 2 first-class tickets from Bozeman, Montana to Oslo, Norway. That was almost as expensive as the car. It came to almost $88,000, and then a 5-year no-cut. Now, we had no agents involved. I have no idea if I had bombed, I didn't make the team, how valid that no-cut contract was.
Right.
But it was $30,000, $31,000, $32,000, $33,000, $34,000. So it all added up to $248,000. That was a lot of money in 1966, because if you prorate that, it's about $50,000 a year. Plus, I started working at the bank, and it was even in '68. Even believe it or not, even had a radio program on KBEA 1480 on your dial, just reading the sports news. So we thought we were doing pretty goddamn well. Now, compared to today,
right?
Today, no, it wasn't very well, but relatively speaking, we was very fortunate.
I don't know if people knew this, but just before we get into other aspects of your great career, was there any resentment from the so-called regular football players? I mean, you were probably making a lot more. You were probably making more money than many of the players on the team.
The word kind of got out. Now the numbers were not in the
right.
paper, but they knew that this was going on, because it was. I see Donnie Anderson up in Green Bay here he and Jim Grabowski for the Packers, they made almost $600,000. They made more than Joe Namath. Joe Namath had a $400,000
right
contract. Actually, a $300,000 bonus and a $33,000 a year for 3 years. I remember of a great guard, Ed Buddy, asked me one year, we were working out and running around the lake in Swope Park. The practice field was on 63rd Street there. And he said, "Hey, Rook, how much money are you making?" I didn't dare to answer Ed what I was making.
I can imagine.
He was the best guard in football, certainly in the AFL, maybe in all of football, in the 5th or 6th year. I wouldn't be surprised if I even made more than he did. But that is the circumstances with the
bidding
war, draft and the bidding war.
Yeah, no question about that. And that only lasted for a little while, but it was certainly good for the players. And John Brody, I think, got a lot of money at one point for that type of thing too. So a lot of those type of things happened. Well, you kind of hit the ground running. I mean, you made a 54-yard field goal for your first kick. Is that correct?
Well, the first field goal I tried was in Houston. Yeah, you're right, Danny. You've done your homework. I tell you that. That was the first attempt. I remember Lenny gave me the strings too, I remember. And then I was nervous and young, and for 54 yards, it was at Houston, and it cleared pretty easily. That was my first attempt in regular season.
Right.
That kick, and we played actually Houston in the preseason too, and Ernie Ladd blocked my first kick. That didn't happen in college. Now, we kicked from 7 yards, and we didn't practice as much as you do these days. And quite a few kicks blocked. They also kicked from 7 yards.
Right.
And the fields weren't quite the same as they are today, I suppose. But I did get off to a good start. But I also do remember I learned early on, because a lot of kickers in the camp, even my rookie year, you could bring 125 people to camp in those days. But after my rookie year, I'd kicked most field goals in the AFL, I believe, that season, the longest field goal. And the first had to go to the Army. I wasn't an American citizen yet, but I had to go to Fort Polk, Louisiana. I was in the National Guard for basic training in the off season right after my rookie year. Hadn't seen the paper for 5 months, and I get the newspaper the day I get out of the Fort Polk, the Shreveport airport in Louisiana. See the first newspaper in 5.5 months, and the first thing I see on the front page, in the Army, you don't see much. That's all, the rumors all the time. There's no cell phone, obviously, no television, no radio, no telephone. So on front page had a picture of Bobby Kennedy, had been shot at the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles. I get to the sports page. Big picture of Hank Stram and Jim Schaaf. Jim Schaaf was our PR director in those days. They were in Europe trying out professional soccer players and rugby players with strong legs to come to camp against me. And I remember in camp my second year, I had Bobby Howfield, John Haslam, and Horst Muhlman.
Oh, yeah.
A kick against me. So the competition was always pretty stiff.
Yeah.
But I was able to do better than they did, I suppose, and made the team. But that's how it was that's how it is in the NFL. If they find somebody, or in pro sports, if they find somebody better than you, or they think they're better than you, why would they keep you?
Right.
So early on, I knew what to expect.
And you basically, at this early part of your career, are making field goals at a 70% rate at a time when the league average was somewhere around 53. So clearly you were head and shoulders ahead of what other people were doing.
Well, the term wasn't even, we didn't even have the term field goal percentage, or hang time wasn't the term that was used. But we glanced at the stats. We knew some made 13 out of 26, which is obviously about 50%. And that's true. It was about 50%, and I made about 70. And some of them were long, and some of them were quite a few were blocked. But I think the biggest reason it was that low, because later, when I was with Green Bay, 15 years later, I kicked over 90% one year, and nearly 90 when I was 42, and well over 80% at that time. But at that time, we were starting to break in punters as holders.
Right.
We didn't have a snapper yet. We didn't have a special snapper, but in the early days, the center played center, typically. The quarterback typically was the holder.
Right.
So the practice was on Friday afternoon for a few minutes. That was about it with practice. We only had one practice field, and there was no warm-up nets.
Right.
So the number of kicks were pretty limited.
So what did you do to, like during football practice, or what did you do to stay sharp? I mean, I don't.
Well, Gerald Wilson was a great punter. I mean, I thought he was every bit as good as Ray Guy. But what helped Ray Guy, I'm sidetracking a little bit, they changed the rules for punting in 1973. Before that, everybody could release on the snap of the ball to cover the punt. So it was more important for hang time when you could, with only the later, when you could wait a second and a half for the interior lineman to cover the punt. And Gerald was more natural for him to kick a long ball. Ray Guy was probably better at hang time, but Gerald could play football. He had played at Southern Mississippi. Mm-hmm. He could play a little bit. So now I was the only one in camp that couldn't do anything else but kick. And Hank would try to keep me occupied. I could run pretty well. And I could, if somebody could fill in to run down on the punt return in practice and do stuff like that or hold the bags, we did the best we could to do that. But basically, it was standing around all day long.
Now, you obviously kicked very well through your entire career, but probably became maybe that much more famous because of the Chiefs' big upset in the Super Bowl, a game where, by the way, as a seventh grader, I made $200 on the Chiefs to win.
I was going to say you made more than us, but you didn't. It was a big payday for us, too, at the time.
But you kicked 3 field goals. You kicked those 3 field goals as the first 9 points of the game. And, in fact, one of the Vikings said you were the most valuable player of the game, even though Len, of course, the quarterback always wins. But so that puts you front and center even further, right?
Well, it wasn't. I do remember, of course, the game very well. I think was even more important than the 3 field goals. The one was nearly 50 yards, the first one. But my first 2 kickoffs was clearly way out of the end zone. And I don't think anybody in the NFL was doing that at that point. Mm-hmm. So they knew, I think it was Carl Eller that complimented me quite a bit after the game, that they felt if we got to the 50-yard line, we had a good chance of scoring. And also our defense was tremendous that year. You know, the Jets, when we beat them in the first playoff game in Shea Stadium, they scored 6 points against us. And then we went to Oakland to beat them to get to the Super Bowl. They only scored 7. And the Vikings were favored by 14 points. Mm-hmm. So when we got to 9, we felt pretty good. But I also felt right before the half, there was 3rd and 5 again. And I'm standing there, so I'm hoping, I got to score, because 12 is not a safe score. But if you get to 16, we're in pretty good shape. And that's when Hank Hole, that 65 horsepower trap, of course. And it opens wide up. Our Bandis wipes out the middle linebacker, and Mike Garrett scores. And that's 16-0. And then we stand, the halftime was not controlled like it is today. It seemed like it lasted forever. Mm-hmm. And it probably lasted over 30 minutes.
Wow.
And so now we had to start almost over again. And we just wanted to win the game somehow, some way. And, of course, they scored pretty quickly. But then Otis got a short pass, 46 yards for a touchdown, and it looked pretty good. And we finished 23-7.
Did you? What was the respect level? You know, you were the best kicker in the league, so you were really a great weapon. But you know, field goal kickers aren't usually maybe that much respected as football players. What was it like for you? Were you good enough, or did they sense that you were a good enough athlete and everything else that you garnered the respect of your teammates?
Well, we did. You know, sometimes people ask me, "How long did you play?" And I said, "Well, I didn't play a heck of a lot, but I was in the league kicking for 19 years." The only thing I could do was trying to make a tackle on the kickoff. And you can't really practice live tackling, you know. But
right.
But I was able to latch on most of the time to somebody, because I was, although if you have Billy White Shoes Johnson or David Hester or Tyreek Hill
right.
in open field, his chances are pretty slim, obviously. So I didn't play football. I didn't know anything about it. But the veterans on this team, like the Fred Arbanis, the Ed Buddy, the E.J. Holub, the Jim Tyrer, Buck and Bobby and Johnny Robinson and Lenny, they were very gracious to me. Mm-hmm. I never didn't hear much. Later in my career, 6 or 7 years later, I heard more about this darn kicker instead of. But the early on, I was welcomed, I think, very warmly. I've never felt funny at all, particularly in the early years.
More of Danny's Reasonably Irreverent podcast after this.
Before you spend your time and money going after an MBA, ask yourself why. Is it so you can tell people you got your MBA? So you can add a line to your CV? So you can call it a CV instead of a resume? Truth is, any MBA will do that. On the other hand, if your goal is to learn how to successfully manage and grow a business with real-world insights from experienced professionals, well, consider getting your MBA from Park University. Our low student-to-teacher ratio gives you personalized attention, and our face-to-face and online classes offered in 8-week terms are designed with working professionals like you in mind. No wonder the Kansas City Business Journal ranks Park University as the top MBA program in the area. Classes begin June 10th at all 4 KC area locations: Parkville, Downtown, Independence, and Lenexa. Visit park.edu to get started.
I was duped, and I recommend you be next. For better or worse, the ultra-realistic impression of me sits now in my wife's office to spook her on a daily basis. So what is Doob? D-O-O-B. It's the keepsake of a lifetime, a 3D-generated, incredibly lifelike figurine. 66 cameras take an image at exactly the same moment in any pose, and state-of-the-art 3D technology transforms that into exact replicas of you, anyone you know or love, a pet, whomever is close to your heart. Create lifetime memories with a Doob. Visit their Facebook page at Doob 3D Kansas City, or better yet, see their incredible creations. Visit their location down on the plaza in the heart of it at 231 West 47th Street in KC Mo. Doob, be next.
For many people, a family law case will be one of the most difficult experiences in their life. The law firm of Kenneth McRae will help you through it. Personal and effective help from Ken in concert with you will develop a unique strategy for your unique case. As Ken always says, divorce can be civil law, not civil war. Licensed in Kansas? Visit McRaeLawOffice.com or call 913-972-4765.
Looking for a truly unique escape from your normal entertainment or corporate team-building regimen? Stay tuned for an exclusive offer only for Reasonably Irreverent listeners. I'm excited to tell you about an extraordinary destination, the Exit Room, located in the heart of beautiful downtown Lee Summit. The Exit Room is a distinctive entertainment option that offers a cool alternative to the normal couples night out, family get-togethers, and corporate team-building events. The Exit Room is a one-of-a-kind boutique escape room catering to special occasions and corporate team-building events and is unmatched in the Kansas City metro. With 5 individually designed and varied escape room adventures, your party or employees can unplug from their electronic world, interact with one another, match wits, and ultimately escape the humdrum of the ordinary. The Exit Room adventures cross decades and centuries and create fascinating fun. I know the owners well. They are local folks, their staff is warm and friendly, their lobby is inviting and beautiful, and their adventures are award-winning. Check online. There are over 1,000 reviews, and note that they are a rare 5-star ranked business. Visit their website and Facebook page, and any of my listeners who books online at theexitroomkc.com using the promo code ClinkScale19 gets 10% off any ticket purchase. The Exit Room in Lee Summit. Unplug, interact, and escape. Our guest is Jan Stenerud. We are here on Kansas City Profiles presented by Easton Roofing. You kicked for the Chiefs for 12 years, and obviously you would end up playing 7 more years in the National Football League. What were the circumstances that led to you having to move on, and was that in any way painful for you?
In some way, it always is when you get cut, I suppose. I was in my 13th year and doing okay. They had kickers in every year.
Right.
This is my 14th year, actually. And Nick Lowry came to camp, and he was good. I think we had a pretty good duel. And I was thinking, well, maybe the nod would go to me or whatever. I thought maybe it would, and I said, well, wait a second, he's 15 years younger, new coaching staff. So anyway, another thing that happened also, Marv Levy was big on hang time, and he wanted me to kick off, for example, as high as I could. And I was used to kicking the ball out of the end zone. I remember in the early years, Danny, in the Municipal Stadium, there was 73 yards to the wall, that east end zone. And George Thoma would mark the X's where my kickoffs would hit. If you kick from the 40-yard line, so it was 73 to the wall. So I was known for kicking off far. But now they want the height, so I think the other teams do. And I was let go then in Kansas City. And I think it was the right decision. Nick turned out to be a real good kicker.
Right.
And he was 15 years younger. So I don't.
And he probably was going to make less money.
And well, yeah, but I understood that completely. What I was a little bit surprised that I wasn't picked up, and I also heard later that now I kicked off the year before I kicked off to the 4 or 5 yard line. So the other teams thought I had lost my leg strength. I couldn't kick the ball into the end zone anymore.
Right, but you were doing it on purpose.
Yeah, because they wanted to kick the highest possible and make the tackle inside the 20 for that matter. But Bart Starr got in trouble up in Green Bay, and he called me personally and said, "Can you still kick?" I hadn't kicked in a couple of months, but I said, "Coach, I think I can." And I went up to Green Bay and probably had my best years there. But the reason being also, now we get special teams coaches, so make sure we got some practice with at least a second-string center maybe, and we start breaking in the punters and holders. So we got more reps during the week. And so I had 4 years in Green Bay. Bart Starr was fired, and you don't really fire Bart Starr.
Yeah.
Great, man, and we were 8-8 that year. We played the playoffs the year before. But Forrest Gregg took over, and he traded me to the Minnesota Vikings. And I was picked up there, and I actually made the Pro Bowl there my first year. Of course, it was indoor. I was 42 years old, so I thought I had years left at that point. But then my 19th year, my back gave out in training camp, and I just barely made it through. And, of course, Bud Grant was the coach up there. And he remembered me also from Super Bowl IV. But anyway, Bud was a great man, great coach. And I was so fortunate. Hank was a tremendous coach, I thought. We all loved Hank Stram. And Paul Wiggin was terrific. And of course, all the coaches I had were great people. But to have Bart and Bud Grant, too, that was... it was fun to have coaches like that.
19 years is a great run, and you had complete success your entire career. But obviously you did have one rough day in Kansas City, and that was the Christmas Day game. One of the kicks that you missed was supposed to be a fake, I guess.
Well, I'm not going to get into that. No, I don't. What happened was, yes, when I see the stats afterwards, I'm 1 out of 4. Now, I know that one was supposed to be a trick kick and one was blocked in overtime. And so I know that in my own mind. And the teammates know that. But still, I blame myself 100% for that loss, because even with those two factors, the score could have been different, I suppose. But nevertheless, with 30 seconds to go, I have a chance to make a field goal that is about the size of an extra point today. It was 31 yards, and I missed it. And it was a good snap. It was a good hold, and it was a warm day in Kansas City. It was almost 60 degrees, and the turf, the footing was good, and missed it. And I still can't really. But you will miss occasionally,
right?
But that was a high 90% shot for me, and it didn't go through. And it bothered me a lot. It bothers me even to this day, many years later, because I should have made that.
Right. Well, everybody does miss. Did you, and we won't dwell on this anymore, but did you know immediately that you had made a poor kick, or did you look up and you're kind of surprised, like a golf shot that you don't think is a bad one?
No, I made pretty decent contact, but here's what also happened in my early years. Keep in mind now, my kicking is totally self-taught.
Right.
I didn't see the other people kicking soccer style live until 3 or 4 or 5 years later. I already had taken the step to what you do now. And in the early days, I kicked from 25 yards. I just kind of tapped it from 35 a little bit harder. And finally, about in my 12th, 14th year, I thought, wait a second. You don't get penalized for kicking the ball 30 yards through the goalpost. You make every kick the same.
Right.
And now when I start preaching to this, so now really people have become special teams coaches in the NFL, they become and listen to me years and years ago. And I would tell them what I had learned over the years, not only by start kicking everything to kick, but repeating things and how do you prepare mentally for a game. I had no idea how to do that early on. I hit that one, plenty hard to make it obvious for 30-some yards. So I didn't know right away that when I left my foot. But I know, of course, it's kind of cruel in kicking field goals. A couple of inches is the difference between success and failure. Mm-hmm. But I failed.
Yeah.
But I didn't know at the impact that I had.
Right.
No.
But you didn't fail very often, obviously, and did win a championship and kicked for 19 years and became the first pure kicker to make the Pro Football Hall of Fame. That when you finished playing, knowing that nobody had ever made the Pro Football Hall of Fame as a pure kicker, did you have any expectation of that? Was it talked about? Did you think about it?
Very little. I did not think about it at all, except sometime late in my career up at Minnesota Vikings when I would do something, and I saw the announcer was a future Hall of Famer, and I thought to myself, well, wait a minute here. What happened was, after 5 years, I got a letter from the Hall of Fame saying that I was one of the 15 finalists. It was a little bit different now than then. There was just 15 finalists, and all the senior guys that I slipped through the crack, they were part of those 15 too. And I saw the list, and I thought, my goodness. I remember it was Al Davis. It was John Riggins. It was Carl Eller. It was Jack Youngblood, Lem Barney. The list goes on and on and on. I thought, there is no way. And now they had this knock on the door, that evening, on Saturday evening. The voters meet the day before the Super Bowl. And that was 25 years after our Super Bowl win. That was in 91. So I was part of a silver team parade, the 25-year all-time Super Bowl team. And I remember riding up at the elevator and riding up the elevator on Friday night. And Saturday they're going to have the meeting, and then they announced it on about noon on Saturday, the day before the Super Bowl. And they announced a new class of the Hall of Fame. And I rolled up the elevator with Jack Buck, the famed announcer from St. Louis, and he was one of the voters. And when he got off the elevator, he said, "Young man, you got my vote tomorrow." And I thought to myself, well, I got one. And then later at that parade, and there were a lot of guys in that parade that were also finalists for that Super Bowl, I haven't heard anything from anybody, so I borrowed somebody's cell phone. There weren't many cell phones in '91, and I called the hotel where my son was staying with me, come down for the Super Bowl, and the operator said, "Well, the line is busy, and there's six calls waiting." So I thought that sounded pretty good, and then I broke in, and my son had just been talking to USA Today, and he said, "Dad, you're in." And I thought, wow, that's hard to believe. And I didn't dare to tell anybody that parade because there were 8 or 9 other guys that did not make it in out of that team. So that's how it happened. And but the timing for that was fairly fortunate on my part. That started about maybe kicking has become important enough that the kicking had to be valued or looked at pretty closely.
Right.
And I was the choice, I guess, more than anybody else in that day. So I got in right away, and that was good timing also. But I'm the one that picked to try that, I suppose.
Tell us, harken back just for a minute. What was life like here in Kansas City off the football field when you were a member of the Chiefs?
Well, when I came here, the Chiefs had just won Super Bowl I, and this town was as football crazy as they are today. I mean, it's hard to compare. You didn't have the social media. You didn't have as much media in the place. But boy, the Chiefs were popular. I mean, it was extremely popular. We had night practice up in William Jewell College. There were several thousand on night practice. Sometimes you walk into a store and somebody says there's a Chief in the store or whatever. I didn't know what to do. Should I do handstands or what the heck should I do? But when we opened up and played the first exhibition game against the Chicago Bears, and of course, the team before had lost to the Packers in Super Bowl I. We scored 66 points, and the stadium was packed in the old stadium. Of course, before they put the seats in after baseball season, there wasn't more than 40,000 there.
Right.
You get up to almost 50 when you put the other seats. But they were standing on their feet and screaming for 3 hours. And all the exhibition games were sold out, but they were important also because most of them were against NFL teams.
Right.
So we tried to beat the NFL.
And Vince Lombardi had made some pretty disparaging comments about the Chiefs after they were beaten in Super Bowl I.
Although it was 14-10 at halftime in Super Bowl I.
Right.
So we were determined to do a good job against the NFL teams, and we were good. We were good. But the interest in Chiefs football 50 years ago was sensational. It was really a great, fortunate time for me to come to Kansas City at that particular time. And
you raised children here?
Yes, my kids were born in 1969 and 71.
Oh. And what did you feel like? Did you have a sense that most people refer to Kansas? One of the first things they say about Kansas City is it's a great place to raise kids.
Well, I was divorced before I was able to raise all my kids. They went back to Montana, but yes, very comfortable in Kansas City.
Right.
It's a nice place. It's an affordable place. Wonderful people in the Midwest. I felt very fortunate to be here for that long as I was. And after football, I did go up to Montana for a while, and later at Colorado Springs for 16 years. I worked for a company after football called HNTB Corporation. We designed stadiums and arenas all over the country so I could travel. And that was also a blessing. Very fortunate to get hooked up with them. Wonderful company. And
what was your role there? Because you had played sports?
The business, first of all, in the early years, when I still played or kicked for the Chiefs, I was Country Club Bank for 8 years. And tried to learn as much as I could about business but also afterwards, the business card at HNTB said, Director of Business Development, HNTB Sports Architecture. Took me a while to learn the whole line
title, right?
I was basically a door opener for them for 22 years, but I could it wasn't email that much. I started in 1989 for them, but making phone calls and finding out who was thinking about a new stadium or a renovation, whether it was on the collegiate level or the pro baseball or pro basketball. That was my role, to find out. And I could talk about what we were capable of doing. And then once we get a chance, I will always bring the best architect with me. And it was a wonderful job and working for HNTB. And now it's a big engineering firm. and architecture firm. It's one of the premier companies in all of the Midwest.
And you've been married now 25 years to your second wife, Patty, and came back to Kansas City a few years ago. How'd you two meet?
Oh, we met in Kansas City doing a fundraiser for De La Salle. I think that she was on that committee. I think actually what they wanted to do, they wanted to meet Joe Montana. And I guess I got hold of me to try to get him introduced to Joe Montana because he agreed actually to be the honorary chairperson for De La Salle fundraising that year.
Yeah, and that's how you met? Do you remember the circumstances or your first date or anything like that?
No, but that's how we got acquainted.
Okay. You have a great affection for golf, but it's not like you were raised as a golfer. And, in fact, we were just talking before we started that you kind of thought it looked a little silly when you were looking out the window at first when you moved close to a golf course.
Well, my first home was at the 10th fairway at Melbourne Country Club. I bought that in '68, right before I went into the basic training in Fort Polk. And I came back in the spring or in the summer, and I could see they were in the rough, so I could see them from my house. And there were people that looked not very athletic, maybe oversized people who roll out of the cart, hit the ball, if it rolled on the ground, I could hear somebody swear, get back in the cart and take a drink and do it again. And I thought, this didn't look too appealing to me. And I didn't care. Then about 2 years later, when I worked at Country Club Bank, this is before the Thompson family bought Country Club Bank. This was owned by Lee Huddleston and Bill Miller and Jay Reynolds. And Jay was one of the owners, and he was a member of Country Club Bank, and he talked to me and give it a second chance. Golf is a good game. So I joined. I didn't play much the first few years at all. I never knew where the driving range was for about the first 10, 12 years. And then I finally get more interest and start practicing. And I'm so thankful for that. It's taken me to playing golf tournaments all over the country, for example. I think this is my 19th year. I'm going out to Pebble Beach to play, and it's all taken care of by the Hall of Fame. And going to nice places and meet a lot of people at some of the most beautiful places in the country, and got to the point that I could play a little bit too. I don't know what I would do in my spare time if I didn't play golf.
Kind of know what you mean. Among football players, the kickers are generally good golfers. Do you think there's something about the motion, the concentration that helps in golf?
Well, I guess you can say that the kickers are maybe the best athletes on the field. That's one reason. No, that probably accuse us of having more time to do that than the other ones. We have a lot of free time on our hand. Plus, we usually stay pretty healthy. I can remember on Monday coming into the locker room, we only had one hot whirlpool at the old stadium. And Lenny Dawson, for example, and his back was sore. I said, Lenny, you want to go and play? And he says, no, I can't play golf. So they couldn't really play golf. They were beaten up after a game, too.
Right.
So maybe that's why the kickers are pretty good, because their bodies are generally pretty healthy during the football season, and they got time.
Well, you are in your mid-70s, and you look in fantastic shape, and I envy you. I'm a few years younger, although not that many, but I still hope I'm looking like you when I'm 76 years old. What have you had any kind of secrets to longevity?
I am probably not as good as, but my weight hasn't changed a heck of a lot. But I'm in okay shape, not in good shape. Every time I need to do a little bit more. I'm fortunate enough, at least I can walk and carry my golf bag.
Right.
And I do a few things now and then, but I need to do more. But I also grew up on 5 meals in Norway, and I think that is probably one reason, because we grew up on 4 fairly small meals and then a supper about 5:30 or so.
Right.
So my portions, even now, I spread out and I eat a snack during the day, but I never really eat a huge meal.
Right.
So maybe that is one factor
that
I don't do that. So, but I'm in okay shape, but it could be better.
It could be better. That's maybe the people of Norway were ahead of their time, because several small meals is considered to be kind of a very good thing to do, and it's like sort of like people discovered this modern thing of having several small meals.
It was a lifestyle that made that, because let's see, you always had an open-faced sandwich before you either go to school or you go to work. Then you would typically bring also an open-faced sandwich to lunch. And so I guess the grown-ups would eat 4 meals. We always, school kids growing up, we always have one before school, then about 11 o'clock at school break.
Right.
Then they only had school till 1:30. As a matter of fact, in grade school, we only went to school every second day.
Wow.
And short day from 8:30 to 1:30. Only went Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. The other classes go on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. But we had homework from day one. Even in first grade, we had homework.
Right.
So the system was different. And since we had a breakfast before we went to school. Then in school, then we got back at 2:00. That was a third meal, very light meal. Then you had supper at 5:30. Then the evening meal around 8:00. So that's just the way we lived, kind of.
Right.
It wasn't really by design that I think it was healthier to eat that way. It just turned out that was the normal way to do it, I suppose.
In looking back at your football career of 19 years, obviously you had great times here. You go back to Green Bay, just as you did last week after your 4-year stint, and Green Bay does things extremely well. But what are maybe one or two of your greatest memories about your football career?
Oh, boy. I get asked that question so many times, and I never think around and think about it. It's the only time I think about it when I get the question. No, obviously, is winning the Super Bowl.
Right.
Hall of Fame was a sweet deal, obviously, but it's different. Although the teammates help you get to that, to help you get into the Hall of Fame because of the great teams and the great teammates you have to help you be successful. But when you win a Super Bowl, you win it with your teammates and the coaching staff and all the fans, the whole city, kind of. So that is by far, always will be by far the thing I cherish the most. And that's why it is so exciting again. Now it's 50 years since we won, and I kind of wish that the odds maker would talk as much about it as they do. So the expectations, they should be as high as they are,
right,
because we're good. We have a great football team. So I hope they can duplicate that. It's been half a century. And that is by far my best memory in 19 years of pro football.
This podcast was made possible by our great sponsors like Easton Roofing, the presenting sponsor of Kansas City Profiles at the Danny Kling Scale Reasonably Irreverent podcast. Easton Roofing, where integrity matters. We hope you enjoyed the latest Danny Kling Scale Reasonably Irreverent podcast. Come back soon for something fresh and new.